Section 12 of Sun, Moon, and Stars, Astronomy for Beginners. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is Jade Mansueto, Sun, Moon, and Stars, Astronomy for Beginners by Agnes Giberne. Chapter 2, More about the Sun. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength, which doeth great things past finding out, yea, and wonders without number. Job chapter 9, verses 4 and 10. Not among the least of the wondrous things of creation are the tremendous disturbances taking place upon the surface of the sun, that raging, roaring sea of flame. A good many explanations have been from time to time offered as to the dark spot seen to move across the face of the sun. Some one or more of these explanations may be true, but a great deal of uncertainty still exists. A sunspot does not commonly consist of merely one black patch. There is a dark center called the umbra, plural umbrae. There is the grayish part surrounding the umbra called the penumbra. Also in the center of the umbra there is sometimes observable an intensely black spot called the nucleus. Sometimes a spot is made up of nucleus and umbra alone, without any penumbra. Sometimes it is made of penumbra alone, without any umbra. Sometimes in one spot there are several umbrae, with the gray penumbra round the whole and gray bridges dividing the umbrae. The enormous size of these spots have been already described in an earlier chapter. 50,000 to 100,000 miles across is nothing unusual. In the year 1873, a spot was seen 5 times as large as the whole land and water surface of the earth. One explanation proposed was that the sun might be a cool body covered over with different envelopes or dense layers of cloudy form, one above another. The inside envelope, or as some say the inside atmosphere, would then be thick and dull-colored, protecting the solid globe within, and reflecting light, but having none of its own. The next envelope would be one mass of raging burning gases, the photosphere in fact. The outer envelope would be a transparent surrounding atmosphere, lighted up by the sea of fire within. A sunspot would then consist of the tearing open of one or more of these envelopes, so as to give glimpses of the gray inner atmosphere, or even of the dark, cool globe at the center. There can be little truth in this explanation, since the notion of a cool and dark body within is now pretty well given up. The apparent blackness of a spot nucleus does not prove actual blackness or absence of heat. A piece of white-hot iron held up against the sun looks black, and it may be merely the contrast of the glowing photosphere which makes the nucleus seem so dark. It is even believed that the blackest parts may be the most intensely hot of all. Another proposed explanation was of dark clouds floating in the sun's atmosphere, but since the whole photosphere is now believed to consist of bright clouds floating in the solar atmosphere, this theory too has gone to the wall. Much doubt is felt whether the spots really are depressions at all, although they certainly have often the appearance of a hollow and cave-like form. Besides apparent changes of shape, caused by the changes of position as the spots travel across the sun's face, there are also real changes constantly taking place. Although the spots often keep their general outlines long enough to be watched across the faces of the sun, and even to be known again after spending nearly a fortnight hidden on the other side, still they are far from being fixed in form. The alterations are at times not only very great, but very rapid. Sometimes in a single hour of watching, an astronomer can see marked movement going on, as you or I might in an hour observe movement slowly taking place in a high layer of clouds. For movements to show at all in 1 hour, at so immense a distance, proves that the actual rate of motion must be very great. Whatever else we know or do not know about the spots, it seems probable that they are caused by some description of cyclones on the sun's surface. A cyclone is a fierce hurricane of wind blowing round and round in a circle, a whirlwind on a large scale. These sun cyclones must indeed be of terrific force and extent, viewed side by side with anything that we see on our earth. The speed of movement perceived in some spots has been calculated to amount to no less than 1 and 200 miles or more each second. The most violent hurricanes of earth sink by comparison into nothing. Sometimes the storm or outbursts come in the shape of a bright spot instead of a dark one. Two astronomers were one day watching the sun from two different observatories when they saw such an event take place. An intense and dazzling spot of light burst out upon the surface of the sun, so intense, so dazzling as to stand quite apart from the radiant photosphere. To one astronomer, it looked like a single spot, while the other saw two spots close together. In about a minute the light grew more dim, and in 5 minutes all was over. But in those 5 minutes the spot or spots had traveled a distance of 35,000 miles. It was a notable matter that the magnets on Earth, those delicate little needles which point so steadily and perseveringly towards the North Pole, seemed to be strongly agitated by this distant solar outburst. This brings us to another interesting fact. The spots on the sun are not always the same in number. Sometimes they are many, sometimes they are few. Long and close watching has made it clear that they pass through a regular order of changes, some years of many spots being followed by other years of less and less spots, then some years of very few spots being followed by other years of more and more spots, decrease and increase being seemingly regular and alternate. This turn or cycle of changes, from more or less and then from less to more again, is found to run its course about once every 11 years, with some variations. Now it has long been known that the magnetic needle goes through curious variations. Though we speak of it as always pointing north, yet it does not always point so exactly. Every day the needle is found to make certain tiny delicate motions, as if faintly struggling to follow the daily movement of the sun, just a little towards the east or just a little towards the west. These tiny motions, having been long watched and measured, were found to go through a regular course of changes, some years more and some years less, waxing and waning by turns. It was discovered that the course of changes from more to less, and from less to more again, took place in about 11 years. These two things, you see, were quite independent of one another. Those who watched the sunspots were not thinking of the magnets, and those who watched the magnets were not thinking of the sunspots. But somebody did at last happen to think of both together. He was laughed at, yet he took the trouble carefully to compare the two. And very remarkably, he found that these two periods in the main agreed, the 11 years of alternate changes in the number of sunspots, and the 11 years of alternate changes in the movements of the magnetic needle. When the spots are most, the needle moves most. When the spots are least, the needle moves least. So much we know, but to explain the why and the wherefore is beyond our power. There is a very singular appearance seen upon the sun which must not be passed over without mention. Some astronomers speak of the whole surface as being mottled all over with a curious rough look when examined through a powerful telescope. This mottling is described by various observers in various ways. One speaks of luminous spots shaped like rice grains, another of luminous spots resembling strokes made with a camel's hair pencil, another of luminous objects or granules, others of multitude of leaves, nodules, crystalline shapes, leaves or scales crossing one another in all directions, like what are called spills in the game of spillikins. They have also been pictured as certain luminous objects of an exceedingly definite shape and general uniformity of size, whose form is that of the oblong leaves of a willow tree. These cover the whole disk of the sun, excepting the space occupied by the spots, in countless millions, and lie crossing each other in every imaginable direction. In size they are said to be about 1,000 miles long by 200 or 300 broad, but they vary a great deal. Where there is a spot, the willow leaves at the edge are said to point pretty regularly towards the center. It would appear, writes Astronomer Royal Ball, alluding to these objects, as if the luminous surface of the sun was composed of intensely bright clouds suspended in a darker atmosphere. Some observers have thought that these floating objects are, occasionally at all events, of a characteristic size and shape variously known as willow leaves or rice granules. We have next to think a little bit more about the edge or limb of the sun and the stormy flames and outbursts there seen. Until of late years, the only time for observing such appearances was during a total eclipse of the sun. Now, however, by means of the spectroscope, it has been found possible to take observations when no eclipse is going on. A few words of explanation as to eclipses of the sun seem needful before going farther. An eclipse of the sun is caused simply by the round body of the moon passing exactly between the sun and the earth so as to hide the sun from us. Let there be a candle on the table while you stand near. The rays of light from the candle fall upon your face. Now move slowly to and fro, a round ball between you and the candle. So long as it is not precisely in the line between, so long as it is a little higher or a little lower or a little to one side, then you can see the flame. Once let the ball come between the light and your eyes, and you see it no more. In other words, the candle flame is eclipsed by the ball. It may seem curious at first that the moon, which is so very small compared with the sun, should have power to cover the sun. But remember the difference of distances. The sun is very far and the moon is very near. Any small object very near will easily hide from your sight a large object at a considerable distance. You may hold up a shilling piece at arm's length and make it cover from sight a man or even a house if the latter be far enough away. The sun at a distance of 92 millions of miles and the moon at a distance of 240,000 miles have to our vision the same seeming size. So when the moon glides between, her round face just about covers the sun's round face. If the moon were traveling exactly in the same plane as the plane of the earth's orbit, an eclipse would be a very common affair indeed. But the plane of the moon's orbit being not quite the same as the plane of the earth's orbit, she passes sometimes a little above and sometimes a little below the exact spot where she would hide the sun's rays from us. Now and then, at certain intervals, she goes just between. And so well is the moon's path in the heavens understood that astronomers can tell us long years beforehand in what day and in what hour an eclipse is certain to take place. An eclipse of the sun is sometimes partial, sometimes total, sometimes annular. In a partial eclipse the moon does indeed pass between, but only so as to hide from us part of the sun. She is a little too low or a little too high to cover his face. In a total eclipse, the moon covers the sun completely, so that for a few minutes the bright photosphere seems blotted out from the heavens, a black round body surrounded by light taking its place. In an annular eclipse, the moon in like manner crosses the sun, but does not succeed in covering him entirely, a rim of bright photosphere showing round the black moon. For in an annular eclipse, the moon, being a little farther away from the earth than at the time of a total eclipse, has too small a disk quite to hide the sun's disk. The blackness of the moon during an eclipse is caused by the fact that her bright side is turned towards the sun and her dark side towards us. An eclipse of the sun can only take place at a new moon, never a full moon. Footnote: a peculiar interest belongs to this fact. For a while our Lord hung upon the cross, there came a strange and mysterious darkness over the whole land for 3 hours. Now it may be supposed that the darkness was caused by an eclipse of the sun, but no eclipse can ever take place except at new moon, nor for more than 6 minutes, and the feast of the Passover, when he was crucified, always took place at the full moon. At her full, the moon is outside the earth's orbit, away from the sun. It cannot be by any possibility passed between. Eclipses of the sun in olden days were a source of widespread awe and terror. Many wild tales and wilder explanations were invented to account for them. Now that we better understand their meaning, fear need no longer be felt, though the strange darkness and singular coloring of the sky and air must always be exceedingly impressive. The following description of the total eclipse of 1860 will be found interesting. It was observed by several astronomers who stationed themselves at various places in the north of Spain. Mr. Airy, the royal astronomer at Borbes, M. Burns of Leipzig near Tarragona, Mr. Lowe near Santander. Mr. Lowe writes, "Before totality commenced, the colors in the sky and on the hills were magnificent beyond all description. The clear sky in the north assumed a deep indigo color, while in the west the horizon was first black like night. In the east the clear sky was very pale blue, with orange and red like sunrise. On the shadow sweeping across, the deep blue in the north changed like magic to pale sunrise tints of orange and red, while the sunrise appearance in the east had changed to indigo. The darkness was great, the countenances of men were of livid pink. The Spaniards lay down, and their children screamed with fear. Fowls hastened to roost, ducks clustered together, pigeons dashed against the houses, flowers closed, and many butterflies flew as if drunk and at last disappeared. The air became very humid, so much so that the grass felt to one of the observers as if recently rained upon. From Descriptive Astronomy by G.F. Chambers. End of chapter 12.